Hi everyone, this is Swati from the softwaretestinghelp.com team, and today we are back with another how-to kind of a series on how to create a defect report. Now before we get there, let's talk about what exactly is a defect. Since we are talking about the defect report in the context of software systems and software projects, any application where there is a requirement that was supposed to be there and that's missing, we can consider that as a defect. When there is an incorrect requirement, that also becomes a defect. When there is something on the site that is not supposed to be there, that wasn't meant to be there, but it's right, it exists, that also becomes a defect. Any kind of enhancement suggestions that a tester has to make, this is the right medium to go ahead and raise a red flag and say, hey, this is what I think will make the system better. You may or may not want to take an action on that. Environment outages or any problems with the environment, followed by documentation related errors. Now a lot of times, the missing, incorrect, extra requirement are things that do not require a lot of explanation, that are pretty clear from the beginning. But it's usually the things like, how come an environment outage becomes a defect? How come a documentation related problem becomes a defect? Now, one thing that we have to really understand is defects do not necessarily mean that, something is wrong with only the application. Now, if something is wrong with the application, yes, that clearly is a defect, but that does not have to be the only situation. Defect is a way for the QA team. So it's defects is a privilege that the QA team has to raise a red flag and say, some work here needs to be done. And a lot of times beginners have trouble identifying bugs because they are under the impression that if it is a defect, there will be something very obvious, like, the page will not be found, or the link gets broken, or, something that is very, very clear for us to discern. But that does not have to be so. Defects are, in fact, the best defects are the ones that are subtle, hard to see, that are kind of not so obvious. So I'm going to first show you what a very, not the normal, page not found, that kind of errors, just probably, much more subtle defects. I'm going to show you that. So we're going to first go through and create the process of encountering a defect. Once we encounter the defect, we'll also talk about how to create the defect report. That means how to log that defect in there. And I'll also show you, because defect management is usually carried out with the help of a tool. So I'll show you, if you were to create a defect report in a tool like Bugzilla, how would you do so? So that is what we will do right now. Yeah, but before that, before you create a bug, it's a good idea to make sure that the defect is indeed a valid defect. That means it's a good idea to have a very thorough understanding of the requirements, so that a tester will be able to make informed decision, an educated decision on whether or not a certain behavior can be construed as a defect or not. And there are other things that we'll talk about the defect report as we go forward. So let me actually first go ahead and create a defect, show you how to encounter a defect. Now for that, I'm going to use an application called OpenEMR. And OpenEMR is actually an open source product that is, that facilitates hospitals to do some hospital management. Again, it does not matter what application is it. This is what I'm going to use as an example today. But if you want to try this tool more, just do a Google search OpenEMR and you'll find all the content and instructions to download it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to create a new patient. So this is basically a system where patients and doctors, hospital staff, they all interact. They have they can set up appointments, and they can actually follow up on the appointments. If following the appointment, they can actually make a record of all the statistics that were collected during the appointment and things like that. So long story short, we'll just create a new patient, and what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to create a patient And then for the date of birth, I'm going to create today's date, choose today's date, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this to take like um, February 31st, which is a date that does not exist, or 0031st for that matter. That's a date that does not exist. So I'll go ahead and now create a new patient with this particular statistics. So what is supposed to happen is either the system should prompt us that, either the system should prompt us that the date 0 is incorrect, or it should, it should just let us know that, or it should not allow us to actually type into the database date of birth field. But none of that is happening. The date of birth, it takes it, it creates a user, and it says it's 2 months old. So neither of them is right. So I'm thinking the 00 is assuming it to be January, but nonetheless, it's not the right way the system should behave. Now, when you look at this, this is a very, very subtle bug. This is not something that is like, very obvious. It's not causing any disruption, but it's also a bug at the same time. So let's go ahead and create this issue or log this issue in a bug report. Now, bug reports typically should have like a template, like all QA artifacts do. So bug report template, it starts with the defect ID. Then we go on to creating the defect title, steps to reproduce, severity, and then a screenshot. Now, defect ID is usually serial number. Most often in most projects, we always recommend it to be serial number. Now, the logic behind using a serial number as a defect ID is when it comes to defects, it does not matter what module they are in, or what feature they are in. It really does not make a lot of sense, because defects are defects. No matter where you find it, it's a good idea to address them. Their work to be done. So it's the simpler the defect ID, the better. So defect IDs are usually serial numbers. Defect title is basically like a description, or a one-line definition of what the problem is. So here, try to fit your problem, try to fit, the description of your bug in about a line or so. So try to give it a concise title. So this is like, you're giving a gist of what exactly is happening here. So the defect title for our defect is new patient creation accepts invalid date for the TOB field, and the date that we have chosen is 2015, 00 and 31. So this is actually, the defect description. Again, take your time with that. Make sure that it is not ambiguous. Make sure that it is not ambiguous. Make sure that it is defining the problem. Now, a lot of times I see definitions like this. New patient creation takes wrong data. So again, this is also okay to a certain extent. Sometimes what happens is I see something like this, homepage not working. Now, I mean, it's understandable that in a defect report you're trying to report a problem, but it's a good idea to make sure that you exactly explain what the problem is. See, homepage not working is very vague, it's very ambiguous. Nobody can say exactly what's happening. So instead, probably you can say homepage when clicked displays a page not found. So that is much more, descriptive of the problem, unambiguous, and there is not a lot of, not a lot of information that is left to imagination. So take your time with this. Try to actually find the right words to describe the problem that you're encountering accurately. Next, coming to steps to reproduce, this is where you will go ahead and give a list of all the activities that, or all the sequence of steps that you've performed on the AUT that has led you to this particular bug. So steps to reproduce, again, try to write it in the form of how you would normally write your test case steps. Again, this have to be instruction based, and when it comes to a defect report, one general principle that is advised to be followed is that the more information you provide, the better. Now, You must have heard this a lot of times on how QAs, or people who are in the QA field need excellent communication. And we always tend to think that communication stops at being able to talk well, or being able to compose an email well, or being able to do some presentation well. But communication starts when you are trying to send an information to another team, and defect report is one of the most critical data that you will share with an external team, for example the development team. So make sure that when you're providing the information, you're communicating the exact intent, and you're communicating and also make sure that you're at least over communicating and not under communicating. So do not ever send a bug report that has less information than necessary. So go ahead and start with the absolute first step. So this is OpenEMR, launch it, and the second step is log in as. So if there is any data that you've provided, be sure to provide the user ID and password, because sometimes even though we assume that developers might know all the login credentials, since testing usually happens in the QA environment, they might not always know that what credentials have been used. And here click on new patient. Enter the following details. From the calendar, and edited it to by typing in the field. So after this, go ahead and mention what you've expected. Now after this step, we have actually clicked on create new patient and confirm new patient. And now what is it that we've expected? Either an error message or a non-editable DOB field would have prevented the creation of a user, of a patient with invalid date. That's what you're expecting. And what is actually happening? The patient is created and the age is showing to be 2 months, right? So that is what you're expecting, and that is what is happening. So make sure that you're providing all the information. And coming to severity, severity is a field that is normally present in your defect report to denote how serious the problem is. So it's something that will try to give us an indication of how critical the problem is. Now again, as is a general rule with any template, if you just leave it up to people, leave it up to your team members and say just assign a severity value, somebody might say this is detrimental, somebody might say this is just easy, I mean not a big deal. So you will never get a uniform sort of assigning of severity value when this kind of information is left to the choice of the user. So certain guidelines have to be created on how to assign the severity value, and those guidelines are things that you will find in your test plan document. Now this is something that I typically use. Now please keep in mind that this might not be the case for, or this might not be the exact same thing that is used for all projects. Now let's look at the definition. So if I have to say that the bug is critical, the bug has to be critical enough to crash the system or cause an abnormal return or the application to hang. So none of that's happening. And number two, it causes a lack of vital functionality with workaround. That's not happening either. So this bug will degrade the quality of the system. However, there is an intelligent workaround. This prevents other areas of the product from being tested. That's not it either. There's an insufficient or unclear error message which has minimum impact on product use. That may be right. So there's an insufficient or unclear error message that has no impact on product use. Now, See, right now, if a patient is created with an invalid date of birth, it will affect the age of the patient, which means if the doctor has to, if a doctor assignment has to happen, like, like for people who are less than 13 years of age, if they are assigned a pediatrician, now for when you assign an, I mean, when a patient is created with an invalid date of birth, all of these things might get affected. So I would say it's a low impact. But then sometimes in the class I've had students argue that it could be cosmetic. Now try to go with a definition, or try to find the severity value that you feel as a tester is right, and that defines the problem to the correct extent. So again, there might be differences of opinion, but whatever you feel, so use your judgment as a tester and try to assign a value that is as close to being accurate as possible, and then go ahead and try and assign a screenshot. So what I would do here is, this is the part I would want to highlight, so I'd just print the screen. Normally, I would attach it to a Word document, and then I'll attach it to the bug. One best practice, the reason, I mean, I'm sure you all know how to create a screenshot, but the reason why I'm showing this part is, another thing that I recommend doing is try to give it an appropriate, name, so that, if the developer saves it onto the desktop, they will not have trouble finding them. So if you keep it a generic name like untitled or, new document, it might probably not be, not make a lot of logical sense. So try to give a name that is appropriate. So go ahead and attach that to your screenshot document. So let's assume that this is the problem. I mean, this is the bug. I'm just going to attach that as a screenshot. So now I have created a bug report. Now status is a column that will be added once the bug report goes out and the bug life cycle is followed, but bug life cycle is for another section. We will treat that in another segment. Another few guidelines that you will have to follow before you log the bug is that, as I said, make sure that you understand the bug correctly, you understand the system behavior correctly, and if you need any help, please always seek clarification, either from your team members or your team lead or from the business analyst or from the development team. Make sure that all the steps are there, and make sure that all the data and all the steps are correct. And once you have this defect report, then you can actually you can use the status column to track both the ownership and the actual work that is being carried out. But this is basically how you create a very, very simple bug, and eventually when all the bugs get added, the cumulative document is then called the bug report. Now coming to Bugzilla, I'll show you how to create the same bug report in Bugzilla. So the option that you would use is file a bug. You will pick a product, that is the project under which this is going. Then you would choose a component that's like the sub modules and all. So you would choose a similarity, so as severity, as you can see, typical values that we are following are seen here, although there might be a difference, and that's because this kind of fields are completely customizable by the administrator. So choose, like, I'm going to choose trivial because it's very simple. Use the summary column for the defect title. Use the comments column for the steps to reproduce. Use the attachment to upload a screenshot document. And when you provide the description, provide an appropriate name, and you submit a bug. The bug ID gets automatically created, and that also is a serial number. So that is how a simple bug report can be created. I hope this session has been useful to you all, and also, one more time, I reiterate, when you're giving out information from the QA team's perspective, give generously. Make sure that you include everything. Make sure that you're accurate. You do a spell check on your defect report like you would on any other QA artifact, because a document that contains spelling and grammar and small inconsistencies shows that we do not care enough about our work, which is not true at all. So do your due diligence to the extent possible, and communicate clearly, communicate articulately. Make sure that the other team does not have to get back to us just because they need some information, because that will be a waste of time, waste of effort for everybody. So defect reports are pretty much a day-to-day activity of a tester's job, and we really I sincerely hope that this session has helped you at least a little bit with the process. As always, please let us know your comments and questions in the comments below. Thank you all for being here. Thanks.